Hello, today is Friday, yay! January the 13th, it's Friday the 13th, guys, and I teach middle school, and we had a dance today on Friday the 13th. I don't know why we did that to ourselves, but it actually went pretty well, all things considered. I'm really glad it's Friday. It has seemed like a super long week this week. Mainly because, well, number one, we had a full week, and number two, we had a lot of activities. We had a lot of after school things going on. Our students had basketball games every single day. They went away twice, and yeah, it's just been a long week. And so both the students and the teachers were tired today. But I just am coming in on here today because I wanted to share with you the sub plans that I did for when I was gone on my 8-week surgery leave. Hopefully there's someone out there that might be going on a surgery leave or a maternity leave that this can help. So let's go ahead and get into it. So first of all, I made sure that all of my materials were set up in an easy to find way in my classroom. That's really important. I put away things that I thought my students might get into. So back there in that cabinet, I put away some of the materials that I was afraid that certain students might take or move or lose. Or just create a general disturbance with to help my sub out. And then I have converted over my rolling cart so that each week I had a spot for my plans. And not only was this good for organizing and dropping things off so that the sub would be able to find things, but it was also good for putting away the materials. So I have in here the materials that students worked on afterwards, because if you have ever done a long-term sub job, you know that if you're there for a while, sometimes things can get mixed together and it's hard to find what you need for that day. So by having these drawers for each week, I was able to give the sub a place to put things, help the sub stay organized, and help me find things when I needed to come in, because I did have to keep up with my grading. It really depends on your district and how you do things, and what type of sub you have, whether or not you'll get any help with the grading. But personally, I mainly wanted my sub there for crowd control and giving assignments and explaining things, not necessarily to keep up with all of the paperwork, because I was still mentally able to do my job. I just wasn't physically able to come in and do, the walking around and all of that. So it really kind of depends on your particular situation. But that worked really well for me. Also included some extra things in the bottom, spares. Those are just things that could be copied if they needed something extra. If there was something I wanted copied, I put it into the copy drawer. And then also, it's not here now because I've been back working, but I had some books that were just extra materials related to what students were learning stacked up here, and I had notes on them for my sub so that they could find things that they needed. I did not leave my day-to-day plan book with my sub. What I left instead was this doc, and I printed it out, and I also made sure that I sent an electronic copy to my principal and to my team members, so that if for some reason someone came in one day to cover for my sub, there was always something to go back to. In my document, I have the date, I have the standard that they're covering for that grade level that day, a general description of the activity so they can kind of look for the paper that's called this. And I tried to keep my labels as close to what I put in here for activity as what it said on the paper. I tried to keep those very consistent so it wouldn't be difficult to make sure that they were doing the right thing. And then I put whether it was going to be an online activity in Canvas or whether it was going to be a paper activity and where they could find that. So that's how I did it. I planned out the entire 6 weeks that way. So I printed this out for my sub. But this was just the overview, okay? And then what I did was I went to my docs here, and I created another more detailed explanation that was like for each grade level that I teach, a Monday through Friday, and it kind of like explained what they were to do, and any information that the sub needed was in here, the words that they were going to be studying, all of those things. I did one of those for each week. So I basically had the overview there, and then in this weekly file, I would put the copies of things, and then on top of that, I would put the weekly explanation. And I only did like the first 3 weeks of copies, and then for the other weeks I copied some things that I felt like I had time to, but other things I just put a note on there, and I put a note in the weekly explanation that said you will need to copy this during planning time. For me that worked because my sub had constant communication with me. He was able to talk to me and ask any questions that he had, and he was actually very responsive. If I sent him a message and asked him something or to let him know something, he was responsive and said, got it. And then if he didn't understand, he would ask me. If you don't have constant communication with your sub, I would suggest that you have somebody on your team that you can talk to. That's relaying information so that there is some sort of communication throughout your leave, even though you're not working. It's nice to just kind of keep tabs on what's going on. So, I left notes, saying you will need to copy this, and it will be for this class period on this day. And that way they had a heads up, they could work on it. We have planning first every day. So even if they came in and they saw that on a Monday morning, which I tried to copy most of my Monday morning things so it didn't happen, but they would have time to recover and copy things before the students came back from electives and started their regular classes. So I did that. And then for my students, we have a learning management system through Canvas. And so in Canvas, I was doing a lot of communicating with my students throughout the time that I was gone. So this is an example of one of my grade level Canvas pages. This is the announcements page, and each week I would send a weekly note that said, this is the work that you're gonna have for this week. Here's what you do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then I also put links in here, and some of these links would go to other assignments that were inside of Canvas, but that way they had the announcement that kind of like laid out the entire week, and then their individual assignments, when they clicked that, would go where they needed to go to do the assignment. Okay. So also sometimes I would have a need to go ahead and put another announcement out for something that was going on, if something changed, and my homepage is set up in Canvas so that up here at the top it always shows the first 3 announcements or the most recent 3 announcements, so students could check this here, and if there was anything new or they needed a link or they were saying they were having a problem and I got a message from my sub that they couldn't get into something, then I could go in here and put the information and address it for my students pretty quickly and easily. The last thing that I did to help my sub stay organized was I had a clipboard, and the clipboard, the clipboard had all of the seating charts for each of my classes, and then it had a copy of my syllabus with my classroom expectations that I passed out at the beginning of the school year and procedures. And I talked to my students and said, hey, here is what's going to happen while I'm out. I had a meeting with each of my classes, and I said, I'm going to need some helpers to do these things. Who do you guys think would be the best people to do these different things? And so with a list of helpers that my students had helped me pick, some people to change the dates, to straighten the classroom, to organize and pass out notebooks, lab assistants to help with setup and cleanup, just different things like that, technology assistant in case they had a problem. Not to be so helpful because There were times when I tried to zoom in to the class to help my students with something. If it hadn't been for my tech assistants that I had set up in advance, that would not have been possible. In addition, I contacted a teacher that was in my hallway that I trusted to help with any kind of tech problems, knowing that the person that I had coming in was, a little bit shy about technology that we've been using recently, to make sure that there was like a person that could serve as a backup as an adult in case that became an issue. I also included in here copies of our passes for the hallway and copies of my reward tickets that are like my classroom currency. And because this is a retired teacher that understood curriculum, copies of our standards for each grade level. And then, of course, I had my rosters, which I'm not going to show you, and a copy of our intervention schedule so that the students, where they were supposed to go each day, would be like right there at his fingertips if he needed to refer back to that schedule. I put in here, because he had to do like what we call check-ins in North Carolina, I put in here a copy of the check-in instructions, like the handbook. And then I have my purple folder, which you have to ask your local school district about the rules. Make sure you talk to your administrators. But for mine, this particular individual was okay to be able to see copies of IEP goals and 504 plans and things like that my students needed. So I just went ahead and put those all in a special folder that was a different color and marked it as private, and I stuck it underneath the clipboard so that the other students wouldn't see it. And then I let my sub know that it was there for him to refer to whenever there was testing or, any questions about special things that needed done for certain students. Another thing that I did to really help my sub was I created a video because I wanted to meet in person with my sub, but it seemed like our schedules just didn't jive the last week or so before I had to go on leave. So I instead created a walkthrough video, and basically I walked through my classroom and I showed my sub where everything was and how I do things. So I started at the door and I explained to the sub, here is the sign out book for when students go to the restroom. These are the expectations. Here are the trays where my students turn things in. This is 6th, this is 7th grade, this is 8th. And then I just walked around. Here's where I usually sit, but you can also sit back in the other corner if you need to, work with students here. Here's where I pull small groups. Here's where the notebooks are stored. Here's where the supplies are for, science experiments. Like I literally walked through my entire classroom. I came over to where I sit and showed the sub, this is my organization system. Here's where I'm keeping, the copies for each week. Everything will not be there for the entire time I'm gone, but I will be sending things with my husband, or I'll be giving them to a team member. And so I was very specific about how things were going to work so the sub did not have any concerns. And then I made sure I left my information with my phone number and also a way to contact me through, social media. And that ended up being a really great thing for us. He would message me on Facebook Messenger, because those would come right to my phone and ding, and then I would know there was an issue, so I could be doing anything, and I would respond as soon as possible. I know that. So, however, some teachers, they want to go on leave and they want to not be contacted at all while they're recovering, but I did not feel that way because, number one, my job is 3 grade levels, 3 curriculums, and 65 students, and it's just very complex. And I knew that there was no possible way I could leave every single thing copied and ready to go for 3 grade levels for 6 weeks. I was going to drive myself crazy trying to do that while still teaching and still running meetings and doing all the things that I do after school. So I knew that I was going to need to be contacted. I just limited my contact. And so if I didn't have time to respond, then I just wouldn't respond. And I had enough backup teachers helping that I had already spoken to and explained things to, that I never really got in a situation where the sub couldn't figure out what to do because he couldn't contact me. There were a couple of times when he had some questions and I wasn't able to answer because I was in a physical therapy appointment, and I'm not going to respond in the middle of a physical therapy appointment. But as soon as I got home and had time later, then I sent him a message and he's like, oh, we ended up doing this. And I'm like, that's fine. And then I might say, hey, tomorrow just do this, to try to make up for whatever, So being flexible, but having lots of plan B set up for your sub and plenty of people helping so that you're sharing the responsibility is always a great idea. Don't forget that sometimes your sub may not end up being there. There are days when a long-term sub has to take a day off, just like, we do. And so sometimes when that happens, it can be very hard to come in as a sub and figure out what another sub has done for you, because a sub in your classroom, a long-term sub, isn't necessarily going to leave everything perfectly laid out the way that we do. So having your backup plans at least electronically sent to another team member and having communication with them so that if that happens, they know where to get another copy of something that might be not sitting where it's supposed to be is really helpful. My last piece of advice that I would give you is that besides talking to your students and just really saying, this is what I expect while I'm gone, and make sure you're doing XYZ and not doing this instead. If you have anything that's something that you do every single day, if you have morning work that you're always going to do, I would just run a whole bunch of it and I would stick it in a folder and I would just say, you can pick what you want. Just, make sure that what you're giving, it would be things that the students would already be exposed to, kind of know how to do, or at least the sub would have a good idea of how to do it, so that you're not creating any problems. But sometimes it's nice for the sub to just have a big folder full of choices and just be able to say, okay, this is what we're going to do today. An example of that in my class is we have an advisory time, and that is the time when we do lots of different things. Anytime we have any special things go on, we have to do student surveys or anything like that, that would happen during advisory time. It's our homeroom, but also that's our SEL time, our social emotional learning time. So I literally went and copied a ton of worksheets on different social emotional skills, put them into a folder, and said, these are choices for homeroom. Do what you want. Any of these things are fine. That just gives the sub a little freedom, and it's something they don't have to run later, so it makes their work a little bit easier. My sub was actually awesome with this and ended up bringing in some picture books to add to the lessons, so that was great in my case. But just having, those things that you do over and over and over again, all ready to go, with options and choices and flexibility for your sub, that's going to definitely help them. So this has just been a real quick overview of the most important things that I think you need to consider when having a long-term sub. Your sub situation may be different than mine. I actually was lucky to have a retired teacher, and he was also previously a principal, subbing for my class, which when you have a middle school class, behavior can be a real challenge. Getting work done can be a real challenge. And so I felt so lucky to have him here for that time while I was gone. But as always, make sure that you are meeting the guidelines for your own school, whatever your principal's expectations are, whatever your district expectations are. Make sure that you have good communication with those people and that you're following all of the protocols for your school. and considering who you have in there for your students, just to make the best situation that you can. Because even though it is important for us to take care of ourselves, it's important for us to take those times that we need to rest and recover if we've had surgery or if we've had a new baby or whatever might be going on in your family. You also need to think about the fact that this is the only chance that these kids get to be in this grade level in this subject in your classroom. So, you want to make the best of it for them as well. So I hope these tips have helped you. And if you have any other suggestions that you've used when you've been gone on leave, or if you have any questions, please make sure you comment and interact with me below this video. Thank you so much for watching. I love you all. Thanks for being here. As always, don't forget to work hard, be kind, and amazing things will happen. Goodbye.
Everybody just do your thing.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. 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 Wake up, today's gonna be a good day.